All right, so after extruding and playing with the bevel, there are multiple other tools to use. Some of them are specific to vertices, some of them are specific to edges, and some of them are specific to faces. So we're going to just try to touch on several of them and see if we can see what they do. It's a lot of just playing around, really. So in edit mode, we've got nothing selected. Let's start with just a few simple functions in vertex mode. So in vertex mode, clicking 1, let's just select this one vertex on the top of the monkey. If you go up here to the top window here, you've got some different options than when you right click. So if you click on the vertex menu, the pull down, you get a bunch of options. We're just going to touch on a few that are interesting to use. So if you hit rip vertices or V, when you do that, notice that when you move your mouse, you don't just move the vertex, you actually split open the geometry. You create a hole. You ripped this vertex from here, it left a new vertex, and you've split it. So if I click on this one and I hit V, I've now split that from that. So each time you do it, well, it's giving me an error on that one for some reason. Maybe I can't rip vertices all I want. Okay, maybe you can't do it twice. That's probably what the issue is. So got this hole created. Now I'm going to undo that a bunch of times. Okay, so I'm back here. Command Z a bunch of times to undo. You can rip multiple vertices. So if I click these two and hit V, notice that you can pull them apart in this way. So it now ripped these. So you get the idea of how to rip these vertices. All right, so that's can be a very useful thing. You can imagine if you're trying to change the geometry or open up a hole in something. Slide vertices is the next one. So let's just click this one, go up to vertex, and shift V or slide vertices. Now, when you do that, you get the option to it's not that different than grabbing and moving it, honestly. It's if you want to slide along a certain axis, you can. It's basically allowing you to slide it along the X or Y axis, really. So I can't imagine using this instead of just grabbing and moving the vertex, but there it is. Okay, one that is pretty useful is this idea of merging vertices. So let's say that you want to maybe reduce the amount of geometry in an area. So let's take this vertex and shift select this vertex. Go up to vertex and merge vertices. Now when you go to merge vertices, you've got merge them at the first one you selected, or the last one you selected, or the center you selected, or the cursor, or collapse. So let's see. So I'm gonna back up here. I'm gonna say, okay, so this is the first one I selected. Shift select the second one. Vertex, merge vertices. I'm gonna say at the first. So what it did is it pulled the second one forward and merged it with the first vertex. Makes sense. Let's undo that. Vertex, merge at the last. Now it's going to pull the first one and merge it to the last one. Let's just go through these. Merge at center. Yep, pulled them both to the center of the two points and merged them together as one. At the cursor. So that's weird. It's going to take any of those vertices and it's going to merge them to wherever your 3D cursor is. So remember some review. If I shift select, let's say back up here, I'm going to shift right click, and my cursor is going to go way up here. And now I'm going to go vertex, merge at the cursor. Of course, it's going to pull those vertices and merge them to wherever the cursor is. Kind of cool. All right. So that's the only ones I'm going to go over for the vertex mode. review that to return this cursor to the original point is Shift-C. And let's work on the edge options, edge tools. So if I hit 2 on my keyboard, or click up here, and I select an edge here, for instance. If I go up to the edge menu, first one's called subdivide. Now subdivide is pretty simple. It's just going to take that edge and divide it into 2. Now when you click off of it, you don't see that division, which is a little tricky, but if you click onto it, you see that I've created 2 edges where there was 1. So if I go into, I've basically created another vertex in the center, right? If you're looking in vertex mode. So you see it in vertex mode, and it basically added a division right in between. So you could find a use for that for sure. Let's look at edge slide, which is the second one. So I'm going to click on this edge, go up to my edge mode, and choose edge slide. Again, very similar to just grabbing the tool, but it's kind of isolating it along 2 axes only. It's going along X and Y, sliding along those axes. Okay, not so exciting. Now, edge split. This should be very similar to vertex split, hopefully. Let's try one we haven't touched and see if it's going to work. I don't really know. Edge split. Well, maybe I need to grab it. Edge split. G. Well, let's say that edge split did not work the way I thought. All right. No reason to harp on that. Let's move to face tools. So in face mode, hitting 3 on your keyboard or clicking up here, choosing a face. There's a few cool options with face mode. One is called inset faces. So if you go up to your face menu up here, the shortcut is just the letter I. Now insetting the face will allow you to as you drag your mouse, it's going to create this kind of diagonal lines, and you want to notice that it didn't really move the geometry inward so much, but it created a bunch more faces and allowed you, if you were again then to kind of grab this face and drag it along the right axes, you would be kind of insetting that whole face, right? So with this monkey, it's not so easy to see, but yeah, here we go. So you create this sort of geometry. Poke faces is kind of similar. This is not not literally, you don't want to poke someone in the face, but with this you hit 3D modeling, you click on a face, go to face mode, poke faces. Now poke faces is it's a little bit odd in this case. Oh, I know why, because that edge had 2. Let me choose a different one that only has, okay, so if I click on this face that I haven't touched and I hit poke faces, it creates a point in the center of the face and 4 diagonal lines to it. So now if I were to go into vertex mode, you can see how this could become useful, and I grab this vertex and I bring it out. I create a very specific type of geometry here. So poking a face creates a vertex in the center essentially that you can then pull out. Now with this model selected, it's a good model to kind of see how the smoothing function works. So if I go back into object mode and I right click and I shade smooth, now you can start to see, you know, how the smoothing is intended to work on what's called a low polygon model. We haven't added much geometry to it. Let's go back to shade flat. Go back to edit mode. All right. Triangulate faces is another option. So let's select a new face. Go into face mode and choose triangulate faces. just basically creates two triangles out of a square. And a very useful one is fill faces. So let's select this face and hit X and say delete this face. So I've made a hole. Now, let's see if we can see that very easily. So I've made a hole in this object, and I have moved on and done a bunch of other stuff, and I want to fill that area. Or if I created a custom hole by splitting the vertexes that I showed you before, I could fill that area. Actually, we'll do that after this to review. So in this case, what we're going to do is go into edge mode, and I'm going to shift and select, I hope, these 4 edges, right? I basically selected the hole I want to fill. And I go into face and go to fill. Ta-da! Now it filled it a little bit oddly. It filled it with triangles. Don't quite know why it did that. What happens if I choose grid fill? Okay, so grid fill filled it, and you get this extra option here where you could actually sorry, no, you can't. Never mind. You filled it with a cube, or with a square, which is what I wanted to do. So let's do a little bit of combination here to review. So why don't I tab out of here, delete this object, create a new mesh. I'm going to create a let's create a sphere. Okay. Now, in edit mode, I'm going to go to vertex. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this vertex, and I'm going to split them, or rip them. Sorry, rip vertices. Okay, cool. So I'm going to make this hole here. Now, so I made this hole, and I then decide that I want to take this shape that I made, but I want to fill this hole with faces. So in 2 mode, or edge mode, I'm going to just carefully select, hopefully, each one of these edges, and go up to face and hit, let's try grid fill. So it found a way to fill that. I'm going to undo that and just go to fill and see what happens. It found another way. So it did it as triangles, but you can see how this is useful. All right, I'm going to stop there.